have classified lions into only two subspecies: Central West Africa Asian lions, Aspanthera leo, and how do I? My screen is frozen. Okay, I think I got that. And Panthera leo melanachita, which was the eastern and South African lion. And this map illustrates that very well. This document was published a couple of years ago by the Cat Specialist Group. So we have to start calling the Asiatic lion Panthera leo. This is the animal. Two pictures to introduce to all of you. And as you know, lions are special when compared to other large cats because they are sexually dimorphic and they are social. The female with about 4-5-month-old cubs, younger cubs, the female. This is a rare picture in the context of a adult female, and a couple of cubs. And later on, when I get into it in more detail, you will understand why I call it. Mr. Desigan, I'm also getting a lot of echo.
Would all switch off our mobile?
Sir, I think
or any kind of device that interfere with the wave.
hello.
Yes,
Umesh Mani sir has 2 instances in the participant list. Could be a reason for this.
One of them is on mute anyway. No, the thing is the audio on my laptop is not working, so I'm doing the audio through the phone.
No, I can hear you.
Yeah, that's through the phone.
When you have the same thing, can you switch off the laptop speaker also? Just mute your laptop, not just audio. Just mute the laptop.
Yeah.
Now it's better, I think.
Much better.
Okay. Is it better now?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Not really.
Still echoing.
My laptop is already on mute. No?
Umesh, can you speak?
See, my laptop is muted. I am speaking through the phone.
I think that needs to be muted as well, sir.
The laptop speaker, can you switch off?
I have.
Even the mobile needs to be muted, I think.
No, mobile I cannot, because I am the coordinator of Zoom. Or maybe I can do it till Ravi is speaking. After that.
Yeah.
Vijay, can you also mute yourself after?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So maybe then, except for Vijay and me, all the other videos can also be kept off. And Vijay, in case you want to say something, if you can just raise your hand, we can probably, start off. Right?
So is it still echoing? Yeah, it is echoing for me. Vikas?
It's fine, Ravi.
Oh,
Yeah, it's echoing for me too.
It's echoing.
Ravi, have you got 2 devices on by any chance?
No chance. Just my. I'm not so tech savvy.
You are connected through your laptop, right, Ravi?
Yes.
Okay. Is your mobile anywhere nearby? Maybe if you can
It's
just
about
switch it off and
2
see.
meters away. I can feel it in the next room. Just give me a minute.
I don't know. I think the echo is probably just part of the. You can't see my video. My video is on, no?
Hello. But the mobile is in the next room. It's echoing.
Umesh sir, for a few minutes, can you just mute your phone too?
1 second.
I'll just tell you on the chat whether it is gone. Now is it better?
Yes.
Someone else? Vijay sir?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me? I don't know. No more echo.
No more echo, sir.
Can we go on?
Yeah, please.
Thanks.
I think we need to check if Ravi is audible. I think when my mic is off, if Ravi is audible or not is what we need to see.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Ravi sir is audible, sir.
Okay.
Ravi, you're good.
Okay, please, let's proceed then. So this is a rare picture from the game context, and we will get to this fairly important difference in behavior between the Asian lion population and the rest of the lion population. A few pictures largely to give you a sense of how these lions live. Normally, most of us go as tourists and see the lions close to a road and with a lot of other human disturbance and so on. But I'm lucky, and my friends who are renowned wildlife photographers have contributed some of their pictures. I just would get the aesthetic aspect of the wildlife experience. A couple of young male. And pretty rare picture of a lion crossing a river. Gir, as you know, is a semi-arid habitat, and there are 7 perennial rivers draining the protected area, which are really the life ecology of the place. These riverine tracts are not just important from a predation, are very important places for lions to rest, given the heat that prevails through 4-5 months of the year. February going on till the monsoon comes in mid-June. What really drives the system? You can see from the previous pictures that the habitat is largely gray, brown, yellow. When comes, it transforms and quite magically. You won't think, looking at this picture, that this is it right. Plants have a very short growth period, hence they need to take advantage of the presence of moisture. He really only gets that one season of rain from about mid-June if you're lucky, going through to about end of September. Now, the lions evolved in Africa, which is here, and by a process of natural dispersal, moved into interesting. Audio is patchy. Is it better now, Venkatesh? Audio check. Venkatesh, is it better now? Okay. I will not shake my head very much. So as you can see, they went as far east as Bihar and as far south as the Narmada River. And so there should have been tens of thousands of lions having somewhat overlapping distribution with tigers and definitely overlapping with leopards. Parts of what is present-day Pakistan, Iran for sure, the Tigris and Euphrates river valleys in Iraq, other parts of Iraq. So that's that extensive lion distribution. But in India, from about 1888, lions have been restricted to Saurashtra Peninsula, Gujarat, and the last lion outside of this in Asia was probably shot in 1947 in a place called Disful in Iran. Now, the question really then is, how did this happen, or why did this happen? The general understanding is it's the advent of firearms. Lions live in groups. Lions roar. So if you can't see them, you hear them. If you see one lion, you're likely to see many more lions. And lions in general inhabit flat and more open habitats. Habitats which are much more easily accessible by humans. So from about the early 19th century and by 1888, the use of firearms and then what was a very significant part of social life, hunting of large cats, is the cause for this dramatic decline in lion numbers and their distribution in Asia in general, and particularly in India. The lions also had a close brush with extinction, indeed, and we'll come to that in a minute. This is the Asiatic lion, and very often you know it's Asiatic. Half jokingly, I always say the only way you know it's an Asian or an African lion depends on where you see it. If you see it in Asia, which is essentially deer and Iran, that's Asiatic. See it elsewhere in Africa, it's African. The reason is because all Asian lions have manes like this, which means the top of the head does not have much hair. The ears are always distinctly visible. In contrast, this is what African lion typically looks like. But to unfortunately confuse matters, 20 to 40% of African lions also look like this. So a full head of hair tells you it is African, but this doesn't tell you whether it's definitely Asian or African. The other feature you can see is this skin belly fold. All Asian lions have a belly fold. But unfortunately, again, not unfortunately, to complicate matters, some African lions also have a belly fold. So the presence of a belly fold is not diagnostic. The absence of it is. So if there is no belly fold, it's an African lion. If it is having a belly fold, it could be Asian or females also have a belly fold, not. Now, just a couple of minutes ago, I mentioned that lions had a very close brush with extinction. As you need to be not, don't focus too much on the accuracy of these numbers. Even estimates of today, we all need to take with a pinch of salt. Human beings, even in small geographies, is not easy. So you can well understand the difficulties of trying to go out and count wild animals. And especially when they give numbers like 177 and 239, rather than say approximately 250 or 200 or something like that, you really need to count those numbers. The last official estimate for the lion population was done in 2015. Around this time now, the next population estimate exercise was scheduled, but for obvious reasons, it could not be carried out. And the last official number is 573. Talking to people who live and who are familiar with the region, I am led to believe that the current population is between 600 to 800 lions, if not even more, of which about 50% of the lion population is actually living outside the protected area. So, depending on which estimate you believe, the lower or the upper end, between 300 to 400 lions are living in villages, towns, bus stands, railway stations, agricultural fields. That's the habitat they primarily live in. Now, what happened 140 years ago was the Nawab of Junagadh recognized that if he didn't take steps, the lions would go extinct. Indeed, there was a push from Lord Curzon also, plus post-independence, the government of Gujarat, the government of India, the international and national conservation community, and scientists have all contributed, not to forget the local people in and around Gir, have all contributed to what I can only call a remarkable conservation. Success, I should say, not victory. I don't think we won it as yet. And that's something we need to recognize and very often in conservation, there are threats and failures. This is tigers, and with the protected area extending out into human dominated habitats. You can see all the patches to the northeast, which are all really small fragments. And you see this bit in there going out here, there, and so on. So there's a lot of between human dominated. Plus, you see several roads going through. There are, what, 7 reservoirs. There are 3, right? The climate. This slide has all that information, but I like to just go back a minute to roughly the Century West. With Sasangir here, which is the tourism headquarters, the Green National Park, and roughly from here you have this some ecological regions. So this is what so the National Park and Sanctuary West would look like. A series of low hills with fairly sparse vegetation. Understood. This is what Sanctuary East looks like, with the rainfall going down to about 650 millimeters. The vegetation is also much more. This is, I mean, I like this slide simply because of the seasonal changes. You can see those 3 panoramic views of winter, summer, and monsoon. Right. So, based on the earlier slide, also. Forest lines. Very often, he grows up on a diet of Animal Planet, Discovery, and whatever else is available on cable television. These wildlife spectacular from Savannah, habitats, Serengeti, Mara, and so on. We somehow then tend to associate lions as only, but we forget that lions even today live in rainforests of Central and West Africa. But it's so difficult to study, it's much more difficult to film, so it doesn't get into popular media. Lions definitely indeed live in a forested habitat, and that's a good illustration of that. There's a lion next to a butea tree. The only time I've seen a lion in a cave. Is a cave, no. Lions and deer, as in Africa, overlap in habitat with its ability to be very, very comfortable in trees. It's and smaller prey size that uses is what enables the niche separation and coexistence of these 2 large. Talking of large cats, we often use this definition their diet. And here, when I say wide-ranging and lions, you're talking about this as their territory, which is area that they would defend, and they all roam. The most prolific and most well-known of the roams is, of course, of the lion, but all large cats roam, and that's their what we call structure, which allows them to do that. And these are the characteristics by which we define large. Lions live in a socio-economic context. By this slide, people, a lot of livestock, the 100-odd villages are within a 10-kilometer radius of the boundaries of the protected area. And this is dated data. It's at least 10, 15 years old now. I expect those numbers to have gone up. The nesses of the Maldari settlements, which are inside the wildlife sanctuary. So again, you can see the numbers there. And the forest settlement villages, which were created by the forest department soon after independence, are also within the wildlife sanctuary. The national park has no human settlements. These are the Maldaris from those days, very, very hardworking, extremely hospitable people. For somebody like me who barely knew how to speak Hindi, them doing field work in those days would have been almost. Those days, camel was their mode. They used to own a horse. Nowadays, increasingly it's turned into horse. Herds typically of about 50 animals, with buffaloes dominating. There would be a few cows and bulls. Within the cattle from the peripheral villages also used to come in the morning, leave in the evening, while the Maldaris would go back to their nest. The nest looks like this. Settlement. Is it better, Nitya, now? Nitya, is the audio better? I'm assuming it's better because there's no response. Thanks, Venkatesh. The has no running water, has no electricity, still keeps breaking up. I am connected to the cable. I'm not even depending on Wi-Fi. Hopefully it will stabilize soon. The nest is often 4 or 5 people, families staying together. The stone fence is their protection against lions and leopards. They are all located close to a perennial source of water, simply because both for their own personal use and for their livestock, they need humongous quantities of water. In the 60s and the 70s, lions and leopards used to jump because these fences are not very high, at best 4 or 5 feet. They would jump these fences, come and attack and kill a lot of livestock, but get very little to eat because the herd would stampede. It is not easy for a lion or leopard to carry an adult livestock back outside because they'll have to jump with it. And certain management actions that were taken has changed the whole scenario. We'll get to that story in a bit. During the daytime, when the livestock is not necessarily, they will not come back to the nest during the day. They are dependent on water holes in the forest, which does create a bit of a competition with wildlife, especially when so many livestock aggregate around water. No wild herbivore will come close to it. Plus, since these animals don't get veterinary care, they also run the risk of transmitting diseases. When they are in such high concentrations. Picture taken churning dirt into butter. Uh, but nowadays, I'm told refrigerated by dairies are coming in and picking up. Is getting a much better income. Major prey species: Nilgai sambar, cheetal. In addition to this, you have just Ikara, langur, porcupine, and maybe even and lions. Cheetal by far the most abundant prey animal. Current estimates in the region of about 55 to 60 area, and sambar in the region of about. It's in the mid belly out there, and these are the tools of its. As the canines, two in the lower jaw and two in the upper jaw, able to size of its paws. So the paws and the canines are what us having breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and maybe a snack in between. They don't have access to a canteen or hunting is dangerous business. Amit it shut. I don't know what to say. Uh, uh, what was I saying? Yeah. So when they get a chance to hunt or feed, they make maximum use of it. So, but typically, I would say in the wild, lions would be successful in hunting every 4 or 5 days. It is not usual for them to not feed for 10 or 12 days. But if it comes to, they can go without any substantive meal for up to 10 or 12 days. Very efficient feeders. You can see the remains of a cheetal stag in velvet. I following two lions for about 10 days. They hadn't, I caught them when their tummies were as full as the previous picture. They just scavenged off a dead buffalo. One of them was radio collared, so I could keep pace with them. Uh, and then one early morning, I think the 11th day morning, at about 4:30, it was summer. I heard a lot of noises. I couldn't obviously go in because it was still dark. This was a picture taken around 7 o'clock in the morning. When I went in, both the lions had moved away, and this is what I found. You could see the eyes have been eaten, the antlers have been chewed to the bone. There again remains no meat left. So two adult male very hungry lions disposed of a cheetal carcass in a couple of hours' time. Just to illustrate the point that predators are very efficient, not just only in killing. Occasionally, lions would also cache their kills because lions are social. They seldom feel the need to store their kill because 5, 6 lions on a cheetal kill, they're not getting very much to feed. But occasionally, you would also find if there are anything to be eaten later on, they would cache a kill like this into a thorn enclosed habitat, primarily to store it from avian scavengers, jungle crows and vultures. There is no other animal that they need to really fear. Daytime lions are resting; they don't want to be waking up to vulture lands near there. Two pictures of lions feeding. Lions obviously don't have access to cutlery, so they have to slice the meat off the carcass. And here, that's a good example. It's applying its molars, modified molars called carnassial teeth. Our molars are flat, grinding teeth. The lion's molars are sharp, knife-like teeth. So you have a dead carcass in front of you. You can't. You're not a python. You can't feed the entire carcass. You need to bite off, slice off chunks of meat, and then swallow it. They don't chew their food. They just bite off chunks and swallow it. Here is a good illustration of their paws, and this is not even an expanded paw. A paws can expand at least 50% of that size. That gives you a sense of how much of a value those paws can be in bringing down. Right on a cheetal kill. If you look carefully, you can see the cheetal there. An adult female on a nilgai kill. This is a radio-collared female. And a group of lions on a domestic buffalo. Both within and of a lion on a cattle carcass inside the forest. And I often describe the lion primarily living within the protected area and lions living outside the protected areas. Protected area are very, very tolerant of human presence, extremely within quotes user friendly, and I don't mean that in any demeaning way. While the lions outside are a completely different cup of tea. I would be very, very, very careful in approaching them on foot. They're very harassed. People often throw stones at them, and all of that means they're irritated. They view human beings as a problem, and you never know when they can come charging. Now, being a carnivore, there are two ways in which we can find out the diet of a lion. One is picking up its droppings, scats. The other is becoming a bit of a detective and looking at kill remains to find out what it is fed. So I have data from Dr. Soni, which shows what the diet of lions are outside the area. Gidnar forest is right next to Junagadh town. It's a small, relatively small patch of forest, and you can see there 55% of what the lions were eating then was domestic livestock, and 45% was sambar meat. And a reasonable sample size, 150 scats. Now, this coastal habitat, which is largely casuarina and prosopis plantations, you can see a much higher percentage of domestic livestock and nilgai. As all of you know, nilgai is not necessarily a forest animal. It lives in agricultural habitat. It lives in these kind of coastal habitats. So lions seem to be able to kill nilgai even outside the protected area. But getting back to the diet within the protected area, the first quantitative study was done by Paul Jostle. He did his fieldwork 1969 to 71, and his studies showed that 75% of what the lions were then feeding was domestic livestock. That was because, as evidenced by Steve Berwick's study, Steve and Paul overlap. Paul focused on lions, Steve focused on ungulates, and his overall population estimate for all species of ungulates together were barely 10,000. The habitat, though productive, was overrun by domestic livestock. As the monsoon rains came, tens of thousands of livestock used to migrate seasonally from as far as Kutch to take advantage of the fresh grass and other vegetation. They would be there for 3-4 months and then they would go back. But once they leave, there's no rain, there's no growth season. So bulk of the fresh growth is already being fed upon, trampled upon by livestock, leaving very little for the wild prey. So based on Jocelyn and Berwick's studies and their recommendation, the Forest Department stopped the migratory influx of migratory livestock. They also created the Central National Park of about 255 kilometers, relocating, resettling the Maldives who were then resident within that patch of habitat. So these two steps really enabled the wild prey population to bounce back to the numbers that I've already explained to you. And the lions seem to have tracked, lions and leopards and other predators seem to have tracked this increase in wild prey, so that in about 20 years, you see a complete reversal of the diet. Now, I also use kill data to find out the prey composition of what the lions are feeding. And the kill data percentage is about 65% wild prey, 35% livestock. But the scat data is a more accurate way to determine diet, because when you pick up a scat, you don't know what it contains. While in the case of kills, almost all livestock kills will get reported to Maldives and file for compensation. Domestic livestock kills almost always take place in more visible habitats, but wild prey kills, nobody will come and tell you, and it can take place in deeper parts of the forest. So, but kill data is very important for me to know whether it's a male that was killed or a female that was killed, whether it's an old animal or a young animal, and so on and so forth. So it was a complementing of and the habitat in which the kill was made. Obviously, from the scat, you don't know the exact site in which the predation had occurred. So while diet is best determined using scat analysis, understanding predation ecology very much depends on us tracking down and exploring field data. So to summarize, there was a distinct seasonal variation in the lion's diet. There was far greater number of wild prey killed during summer and much greater of and stock is still a very important prey base. Any which way you look at it, at least 25% of what the lions are eating within the protected area is livestock. Even though cows form a small proportion of the livestock resident within the park, from both scat analysis and kill data, cows were killed much more often than buffaloes. Cows tend to bolt, run away on seeing a predator. Buffaloes can stand their ground. I've seen at least on 2 occasions, 4 or 5 buffaloes more or less lock their horns and charge towards a lion, making it abandon the hunt, especially if it's just 1 or 2 lions. If they're greater in number, they'll circle and probably be more successful in bringing it down. In general, adults of prey were being killed much more often than younger ones. And that gives you a sense of how the niche separation is taking place between leopards and lions. Leopards, in general, would kill greater number of sambar fawns compared to lions. And lions, obviously, being bigger in size, being social, need a bigger kill rather than smaller kills. Now, shifting subjects, moving on to social organization. We all know that the collective noun for lions is pride, but pride really doesn't include the male. An ecological definition of a pride is a group of 2 to 15 females and their dependent offspring. The males are what are called as coalitions. They can range in size from 2 to 7 males, and they are invariably unrelated to the pride. And there is good reason for it. If they are related to the pride, it's going to result in inbreeding. And the tenure of a coalition is limited. Prides tend to live in the same region for generation after generation. So that's a good picture of a 1, 2, and 3 adult females, and a young one of varying ages. This is much older, young one. And here is two males of a 5-male coalition I was studying, and this is a good example of how close they allow access. And here I'm more or less peering over them, taking a wide. Again, this 3 from a 5-male coalition. You don't necessarily see all members of the coalition together. They can, you sometimes see them on line, sometimes 2 and 3 and so on. Kind of journey in the development of lions. They're obviously not the same animals, but just to give you a total understanding of appearance changes. Both young males and young females are somewhat dependent on the pride till about age 3. At age 3, all males have to disperse to avoid inbreeding. Doesn't matter the nature of the relationship, they will make it very, very clear to the 3-year-old males that they have to leave. So between 3 and 5 years, they form what's called as a coalition, and depending on their ability to bond, if males are moving out, if they don't bond with another single male, the chances spend about a year or so wandering around the habitat, keeping a low profile, trying to find out if there are old, weak males and whether there's an opportunity for them to take over that territory. Now, we began by saying that a large cat is territorial. Does that translate into animal behavior? Establish, maintain territory, all its territory. Countries have border security force and the army and air force and navy and so on. Here, it's the male's job to really mark its territory, to patrol its territory, and if required, defend its territory. And the tenure often is between 2 to 4 years, and the idea is to gain access to as many breeding females as possible and leave genes for the next generation. And that's why lions often involved in infanticide soon after they take over. Umesh, I got your message. So this is data from my PhD student, Meena Venkatraman. These are methods that were used. Very, very interesting results. You see the male group size, minus 0.5. So it's either 2 or less than 2. That's the average group size. Other observations range from 1 to 3. When the group size range from 1 to 5. But you have a comparison of 3 timelines. Jocelyn's data from 1969 to 71, my data from 1985 to 19, and Meena who did a work between 2000. Find that there is definitely a distinct reduction both in female group size. We don't know what is driving that, but into to try and understand the ecology behind this. Now, look at that data size. I mean, 819 sightings, covering more than 1,000 square kilometers of area with 112 individual lines, animals during my study period. Meena did much better than I have done. And interesting data here in terms of sex ratio, very, very high male to female sex ratio, very good top to female sex ratio, and very, very good litter size also. So as a population, it's doing very well. It's a very frequent population. Just a comparison from studies from Africa, you see that the density of deer is not bad at all, but the male group size and female group size is definitely much lower than what we have. Other thing, of course, is the male-female association. Only 12% of the lion sightings female, and I referred to the earlier picture where I said that's a very rare picture. So just to track what happens in the female, a female cub is born at the age of about 3 or 4. She will decide either to be part of the pride, which means it gets integrated, or dispersed. There is a small number of female cubs which disperse. Then from about age 3 to 11, they are able to breed, and with luck, post-breeding phase, they can survive for 5 to 6 years. So that, this is Africa data. We unfortunately don't have such long-term studies in India to build this kind of tree. Now, in the case of male, you see it's very different. At the age of 3, there is no integration. They have to move. In 3 to 5, they try and form coalition. Of course, if there is more than one male dispersing from a pride, they will automatically form a coalition. They establish territory, and they have 2 to 3, 4 years of tenure. Then they get ousted. And post-ousting, with luck, they will survive for a few more years, and then what is a nomadic phase. So they have 2 nomadic phases. One here between age 3 and 5, between dispersal from their natal territory, natal pride, the pride in which they were born and territory established. And another nomadic phase after they have lost. The male and the female line. This is a behavior called Fleming. The male is obviously testing the reproductive availability of the female. Almost sure that these lines are mated. The male line really sticks close to the female because it moves away. There are other males in the system, including his own coalition partners, who take over the female. Because of the whole process of mating, it's very loud, very aggressive, very action-filled. You can see from the tautness of how these animals are moving and the act of copulation. The peak, when mating takes place over anything from 3 to 7 days, 2 to 3, 4 days is in the middle is the peak, and they can copulate 3, 4 times every hour. And at the end of each copulation, the female will actually turn around and try to hit the male if he doesn't get off, because the male is actually can be a threat. Look at the size difference. If he bites down on the neck of the female, she's dead. So evolutionarily, the female is adapted to allow the male to mate, and as soon as he ejaculates, she will turn around and hit him. So you can see lions mate around the year, but monsoon and early winter, very, very low number of mating. Bulk of the mating is in winter and early summer. It's an ecological adaptation. The gestation period is 110 days, and the bulk of the births are taking place in late winter. Because then water becomes a restricted resource. Prey populations tend to flock around water holes, and that gives a much better chance for males with young cubs to hunt. So this is already showing you birth peaks. Again, births around the year. Males resort to infanticide if there are any cubs which are suckling. Lactating females are not available for mating. The whole idea of a male taking over territory is to have access to females for mating. So it doesn't benefit the new male to protect the cubs of the previous male. The idea in infanticide is once a female loses her cubs, you Injuries like this are very, very common in males, and that's the cost of fighting, defending territory, and so on. But they know how to deal with it. There's absolutely no need for any human intervention. Wild animals. And this is normally how you tend to see males patrolling their territory on human-made paths. They can walk through the forest also, but they do seem to prefer human-made paths because there are no ponds, there's no vegetation obstructing, and it's soft. And this is the resource they are defending, female and the cubs, and normally cubs sired by them. Males have two visiting tasks. One is roaring, and they can roar in any which position. They can lie down and roar, they can stand up and roar, they can walk and roar. And roaring is a short duration, long distance visiting. Scent marking is a short distance, longer lasting, longer duration visiting. What I mean by here is a lion can roar 3 to 4 times every hour from about sunset to well after sun has risen. And depending on the climate and the position and the wind speed and so on, it can be heard 5-6 kilometers away. Scent marking, but once the lion stops roaring, you don't hear it anymore. Scent marking, you'll have to get pretty close to it to identify which lion has scent mark because both the roar and the scent is specific to each individual. But it can last much longer. It can last a couple of weeks. So they have these two ways of signaling. There's one more way, they scrape the ground and they can leave token scats and so on. So these are the 3 ways in which they mark their territory. Dr. John Singh to my left here, believe it or not, some of you would have seen me in this outside from the late 80s with one of our radio colored animals. We radio colored 8 animals, pretty primitive equipment we had. But it was wonderful because this was the first long-term radio coloring study of a large cat. My wonderful field crew and my colleague, who was studying ungulates, and I was studying. Radio coloring meant you had to climb hills all the time to get radio locations, and locations enable you to build maps like this. Without radio coloring, getting to this kind of data is almost impossible. If anybody gives you maps without radio coloring, I would not believe. More sophisticated techniques to analyze radio coloring information now. In my time, I could just use what is called. So, to summarize, mean correlation size of 1.4, males rarely associating with female prides, high incidence of infanticide, and MENA's study showing that the minimum home range for a male lion was more than 50 square kilometers, while a subadult had a much higher home range because the subadult is this person trying to find its. And there was overlap between adjoining male coalitions. I've been talking about lions outside. This is a good way to illustrate it. This is the deer protected area right here, but you can see all around, and these maps give you a much idea of the kind of fragmented nature of these habitats outside. From an official data from the last census, and you can see that out of the 573 animals, only 304 are within the protected area, and the rest of them spread around. And this, by the way, is Barda Wildlife Sanctuary, a small habitat near Porbandar, which the Gujarat government is touting as the site for transportation. This is not unusual. You see 2 villagers on their motorbike, and in the foreground, a lioness sleeping. And this is inside threats, including a railway track. Occasionally, lions do get knocked down both by railway track and heavy traffic. Umesh, you need to tell me in terms of time. You told me 10 minutes. Is the meeting going to end? Do we have time? I can skip this if the time is a constraint.
It doesn't look like it is getting cut off. So maybe if you want to continue for another few minutes.
Okay. So we often don't hear of conflict. We often don't hear of lion-human conflict. Oops. Okay. That's exactly what I'm going to be talking about. I have used the word lions are user-friendly, so I better uh, redefine that in the sense that lions are as dangerous, as capable of killing us like any other large cat. But they do not kill, should not be taken as a deficiency of the animal. I should phrase it somewhat differently and say that they don't kill is actually a speciality, a special nature. You see how they're able to kill large animals. I mean, an eagle weighing well over 250 kilograms. That lion weighed only about 108 kilograms. She killed it on her own. So if an animal is able to bring down another animal more than twice her weight on her own, we should not doubt its predatory prowess. Animal behaviors get adapted based on their interaction with the habitat, their prey, as well as human beings. I've also mentioned that lions within the forest and lions outside the forest behave very different. But even outside the forest, lions don't attack people, kill people, eat people as often as one would expect. There was a phase of about 2 years in the late 80s when Saurashtra experienced very, very severe droughts. And that's when we saw a huge spike in lion attacks. And that's been published way back in 94. And I will spend a few minutes talking about that to explain what we observed. So we were able to access data from 1978 to 1971 using forest reports. Fairly robust database, 193 attacks, which averages little less than 15 attacks a year. Out of the 193 attacks, 28 people died, which is about 2.2 per year. So very small percentage of the people attacked were dying. 87, 88, as I said, the 2 years of severe drought. And we divided the data between pre-drought and post-drought. And look at how dramatic that data is. Before the drought, the attacks were just over 7 a year. After the drought, it is 40 a year. So that's more or less once every 10 days. And before the drought, less than one person was dying per year from the attacks. After the drought, you were finding up to 7 people dying per year. And out of the 20 people who died, 7 were also fed upon. During the pre-drought, there was no evidence of lions feeding on human corpses. So something strange, something different, something new was happening. You can also see that a large percentage of the attacks was taking place outside the protected area in those times, in the 80s and early 90s. The number of lions outside the protected area was not as high as it is today. Attacks were taking place as far away as 73 kilometers from the boundaries. So lions were covering fairly large regions. So pre-drought, post-drought, the important difference was a greater percentage of the attacks were taking place. Pre-drought, the distribution of attacks was random. Post-drought, it was clustered around like what I talked about, the chicken necks, and also closer to the baiting sites. And these two factors seem to be operating. Illustrated in the form of a map, there is a pre-drought data. The dark circles are attacks, and the open circles are attacks in which the person died. So you can see fairly widespread both within as well as. Here you see post-drought, this concentration around the chicken neck here, concentration around the chicken, and a far greater number taking place in the forest. Do we have an ecological explanation? Yes. feel that um, during the drought, lions outside the forest had continued to have access to livestock, but the poor herdsmen started defending their livestock after the rain came, and that resulted in much more of a conflict with lions. Lions got pretty desperate. They started jumping whatever protection the herds had at night, and without electricity in confined spaces, lions were attacking people. But there were at least two or three attacks in which lions just walked up to people sleeping on the veranda of their homes, concrete homes, and seemed to attack. So a lot of things at work, no definitive explanation. And the only other record of such an activity was way back in the early 1900s, which also seemed to be a post-war phenomenon. So there have been two instances so far in recorded history of lions and deer with imports turning into animals. Last 5 or 6 slides. This is the first photograph I took of the lion, December 1985. As all of you know, I grew up in Madras in Tamil Nadu. So my knowledge of Hindi was I did study Hindi in school, barely passed in my schooling. And then went to Gujarat. I joined the Wildlife Institute and soon after went to Gujarat. So my tutors into Hindi, I had to communicate with this little boy who was my guide, 10, 12-year-old. I quit a marketing job to get into wildlife, and I was quite excited that I landed this project to my PhD. And those days, guidance wasn't great. I was told, oh, there are lions in Gujarat. More or less said, go and start your field research. Yes, we had some written documents, but in terms of introducing to the animal, all the field, all the focus department, it was all left to my own devices. So, exploratory visit, 4 days, lots of lion pug marks. You could hear them roar every evening and night. Lots of scats, a few kills, but absolutely no sign of the animal. And I was beginning to have doubts about my decision to study the lion. I mean, you don't see the animal, how much, and these are pre-camera trap rays and so on. How much can you data can you gather? Last evening, fairly close to sunset, out of the bush from about 100 meters away, 4 such animals emerged, and they seem to be aggressive to me. They seem to be rushing towards me. So I kind of looked at the boy and said, "What should we do?" And he said he didn't speak anything. He more or less put his finger to his lips and said, "Keep quiet," and assured me things would be okay. So I more held my breath and stand still, hoping they won't attack us. Took me a few minutes to realize that I had my binoculars and camera, and so I should do something with them. And I started taking pictures. And now I know these are 4 sovereign lions. They were in a playful mood. They were just going about their business, not interested in our presence at all. So I got this picture. By then, 3 animals had disappeared, but very, very proud because this is my first picture of them. It took about 6 months to do this. Get as close sometimes as 5 or less meters from the animal. Primarily because when you do a long-term study, you need to identify animals. And the only way I could identify them, of course, I had colored animals, I could identify them without any doubt. Other animals I had to identify based on vibrissae spot marks and scars and so on. And in a dense vegetation like what you can see here, even if you had a best, the vegetation will obscure your ability to identify. And that is the only reason I had to do this. This again is a wide angle picture. You can see the lion keeping an eye on me and my own shadow there. These are pictures of a much younger phase of my life when you felt that, you do these kind of things. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody now, and I definitely wouldn't do it now. Primarily because I'm not so familiar, not so much used to these animals. This is no attempt at undermining the wild nature of these animals, but more to highlight the special nature of these animals. A adult male sleeping in summer. I crept up, took this picture. He heard the camera shutter go. I mean, these are pre-digital cameras, of course. And look at what he did. No alarm, just curiosity. What was that noise? Conservation in India, I don't have to tell you, continues to be a challenge. This is a picture again from my field. Border of the national park. Out of mating lions walking on the road. In the background, a state transport bus. So there is so much of human activity, human ambitions, human needs that we need to take on board and reconcile how we do conservation in this country. We may always a challenge, but let us not forget that India has actually done very, very well. We just have to look around the neighborhood to realize that. Can we do better? We can probably do 1,000 times better. And people like all of us, groups like MNS, I think, have a very important role. And it's important, even more important for us to reach out, form coalitions, because unfortunately, in the conservation field, collaboration across institutions is a rarity. Somehow we seem to end up being competitive. I'm not saying MNS is competitive, but the nature of the game in conservation is very, very important. Last couple of slides, I think. Though anybody wants to talk online, whatever time, it's okay with them. Just 2 people want to listen, I give it up. Because I have had the absolute privilege of spending more than 4 full years working, living with these animals. Bulk of my work was done on foot. I have literally slept with lions. I've sat so close to lions, roaring that I smelled bad breath and spittle on my face. These are experiences that I doubt anybody else would have. It has given me an insight. I've stayed engaged with these animals since at least 1985. Hopefully, what I am saying makes sense and logical. And I also want Indians to realize how special these animals are and definitely recognize that India also has lions and not just lions. Gir is also a wonderful place, not just for large charismatic species, but also for some of the most stunning sunrises and sunsets. And I close by acknowledging these people. Meena, my PhD student for data, my field assistant without whom I done this work, the permission from the Gujarat Forest Department, the support from Wildlife Institute of India, and my photographer friends Manoj Dolakia, Kalyan Verma, Rupinder Shah, and Narendra Modi. Very much, Umesh, time for questions. Umesh?
Thanks, Ravi.
Already moving to you.
Vijay, do you want to say something?
Yeah. The questions are coming to you already. I think.
Umesh, you need to help me with my chat. I don't seem to be able to locate my chat.
That's fine. I'll read them out to you. Ravi, can you hear me?
Yes.
He's waiting.
Okay. So I had myself put in a couple of questions.
He's waiting.
One is when outside males try to join a coalition, are they accepted easily?
No, they will not be accepted.
Right.
Because there is no value in accepting outside males.
So they'll have to fight for it.
No, that's it. That is the whole territorial takeover.
Okay. Okay. Fine. Okay. The second question was, is there a specific mating season?
I have showed the data. I can go back.
Did you mention the season?
Yeah. We saw the data.
Yeah. They make me throughout the year.
Throughout the year. Okay, fine. Okay, the next question from Venkatesh. What about the cultural status of lions?
You'll have to unpack the question.
Sorry?
I don't understand the question. I need to know what exactly is it.
Venkatesh, you can unmute yourself and elaborate the question, please.
From me, Aparna. Venkatesh's wife.
Yes, Aparna.
Venkatesh's wife.
Sure.
No. You know, the lion is an icon. Is always like associated with royalty, and even like countries like UK or Sri Lanka, where really the lion is not there, but it's an important symbol of their cultural life. I mean, how does that work?
Okay. The lion has a mane. And historically, we have. I think people have to mute now, otherwise it's echoing. I can't hear myself.
Yeah.
Should we unmute everybody?
No. If you unmute, it will be chaos.
Yeah, exactly.
Please mute everybody.
Yeah, everybody's on mute only.
No, I'm getting a lot of echo. So, Aparna, historically, I think the icon is always a male lion. You don't see lionesses represented. And it's the male that seems to have caught the fancy of people. People like Mahesh Rangarajan have written extensively on this issue. Divya Madhusing Chavda has extensively on this issue. That's about as much I would get into that. I don't have a much deeper understanding of that. Does that help? Aparna? Okay. Next.
I shall look them up.
Are coalition members part of the same pride? No. I mean, that's again something I said early on. If coalition members are part of the same pride, how will it be avoided? Coalition members are temporary members of a pride. I mean, the pride by definition is related females are their dependent offspring. Pride but plus coalition is the larger social unit of lives. The coalition keeps changing every few years. Does that answer your question? I don't know why I can't access my chat. If I can access my chat, it should be a lot. Is it because I'm sharing my screen?
Hello. Yeah, I think you can go out of your screen.
Okay. Oh yeah, sorry. I have it here. It's my bad. Okay, I have the questions. No, if all of you can mute, I have the questions now. I can deal with it. Just that a lot of it is good morning. Okay, how come we don't hear many man than? Okay, I think we dealt with that. A couple of questions. Are outside males accepted easily when they try to join a coalition? I have answered that. Specific mating season has already been done. Cultural statement dealt with. Concept long. Is the Gujarat government standing at a relocation project? That is getting into conservation. My idea today was just to focus on ecology. The short answer is yes. If there is interest, we can do a similar session, focus completely on conservation and the Supreme Court judgment. That's up to MNS to take a call. How old do females versus males survive in the wild? Good question, Gayatri. Females, on an average, I think I showed in that flow diagram, survive longer, between 15 to 18 years. In captivity, they can live for even much longer, but their quality of life would be much reduced because arthritis would set in and they lose their teeth, which means they can't eat and so on. So in the wild, a male is lucky to live to be about 12 years. So there's about 5 to 6 years difference between the lifespan of a wild male and a wild female animal. The males are living shorter lives simply because of the nature of their life. They're getting involved in much more conflict. And as they grow older and weaker, the chance of them surviving is much less. And once they lose their territory, their nomadic phase is very, very filled with risk. Every other male, if it can get hold of an old nomadic male, will kill it because they see it as competition. While other lions tend to be much more tolerant of females. Are coalition members part of the same pride? Are the issue male members who are broken away from the same pride? No. Again, just to make sure we're very clear, all male cubs at the age of 3 have to disperse. So they have left their pride. There is no going back to their pride. So that's the first point to keep in mind. Now, dispersing group can be either one male or multiple males. Let's assume it's a one male situation. Around the same time, from some other pride, a similar single male could have also dispersed. Now, these two single males are roaming their habitat and by some chance tend to meet up. They like each other. If they recognize opportunity, they will then form a two-male coalition. And then for the next year, 2 years, they're bonding, they're growing in size, gaining in experience. And if they then find a pair of weaker, older coalition males, they will attempt a takeover. This will not be their own pride. This will be some other pride. And if they succeed, then they form the coalition of that pride. So you see, these two males from two different prides can come and form a coalition. And then they take over a third pride, which is not either of their natal prides. So that's one scenario. The other scenario was 8 cubs were born. Or let's say 20 cubs were born, 10 have survived because 4 or 5 females are giving birth. Out of the 10, there are 4 which are males and they've reached the age of 3. Now, all these 4 males, which could either be brothers or cousin brothers, would disperse together. In such a case, be it 2 or be it 4, and 3 and above, they will never accept any other male. If they are 2 males, sometimes they tend to accept a lone male from some other point. So if more than 2 males are dispersing at the same time, their coalition is already formed. If single males are dispersing, they have to form a coalition after dispersing. Once the coalition formed, the rest of the process is the same, whether it's a single male or multiple males dispersing. What is the status of translocation? We said that. What is the age range for which females are reproductive? I think it's 3 to 11 years. Eleven is getting old. At least 2.5 years. They make sure that their young are adults before they come back into these. Are they pushed out of the pride when they lose? No, they don't. Females seldom become nomadic. There is no attempt at pushing them out. Those are all the questions I have on chat, Umesh. If people otherwise have audio questions, I'm happy to take.
Okay.
Vijay, you're on mute, I think.
Thanks a lot, Ravi, for.
We can't hear you.
Oh, well, no words to explain the fantastic talk that we had. And as Ravi rightly said, Ravi, Ravi writes a lot on our Google group. Also part of the WhatsApp group. So if anybody have questions, you can always directly interact with him. Ravi is very, very happy to respond. So, Umesh Bhai, thank you very much for for all the technical backup that you gave in order to conduct this meeting. Now, if there is nothing, officially the meeting is adjourned, but as usual, MNS meeting is adjourned. You hang around and talk a bit. So if anybody wants to do it, I'm sure. I don't. So if anybody wants to do it, if anybody wants to be there around and discuss and talk, you're most welcome. Anyway, thanks a lot. Thank you all very much for having come on to the meeting. Thanks, Ravi, again. And thanks.
Ravi, thank you so much.
Yeah. Umesh Bhai, if anybody still wants to chat.
Yeah, I think now we can probably unmute everybody.
Yeah. Umesh Bhai, if anybody still wants to chat.
Yeah, I have unmuted everybody now. So
Yeah.
anybody wants to stay on and chat, most welcome.
On the environmental impact notification, there's a lot of stuff going around. If there is interest, I'm happy to share all the information that comes my way.
I think one of the things that came up was that a lot of people wanted to register their objections but did not know how to do that.
It's available online, but first is what is it that we are going to object? That if the text is going to be same, people sign on to the same text rather than submitted individually. If the objections are different, it is useful for people to submit it individually. You can either submit it collectively as MNS or a bunch of people. The text is same. There's not point in hundreds of people sending the same text.
Right. I think, yeah, he's right. I think what we need to do is to put our thoughts together and then present it as one, as part of from the body itself. Discuss that further as days go by. Of course, we'll need
Yeah,
Ravi's
so
help.
maybe draft a
Yeah.
set of objections. Yeah, maybe
In order to ensure
draft them and get signatures from everybody, and we can.
because Ravi is also sat on the board of wildlife, so we know he also knows how the policy
Yes.
how the policies are made. So
Umesh, you had a sense of how many people might be attended?
28.
30. At one point it was 30. Came down to about,
Okay.
stabilized at about 28.
And but for the initial audio, did it improve?
That's, I think, 2.5 times what we
There was no
normally
issue.
get.
It was fine.
Good.
Yeah, it was good.
Okay.
Yeah. So, right then, thank you. Bye. Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. Sumesh, bye.
Thank you.